This week on This is America in the World, we visit the Embassy of the Republic of Estonia in Washington to talk with Estonia's ambassador to the United States, Jonatan Vseviov. We talked about his country where people vote and file their income taxes online, and Estonia's top rankings internationally in human rights, freedom of the press, and the ease of doing business. This is America and the World is brought to you by Whittle School and Studios, the U.S.-China Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Julia Chang Block, President, the League of Arab States, the Republic of Haiti, the Rotendaro Family Trust, Japan, history, hospitality, and advanced technology, sharing tomorrow. The Forerunner Foundation, dedicated to forward-thinking public policy. And the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for your hospitality today, and the staff has just been wonderful welcoming us.
Thank you, and welcome to the embassy.
Tell us three things we should know about your wonderful country.
We're a small country, but we have a big impact. We have a big impact when it comes to technology, when it comes to security. We take security very seriously. And we're a very vibrant people, small but vibrant. I guess these are the three things that come to mind first.
As I was reading about Estonia, I'm seeing all these international rankings, first here and third there and eighth there and so and so. And it's everything from human rights to freedom of the press to the environment to education, civil liberties. How did all this happen so quickly?
Well, many would say that's what we always were. If it hadn't been for the 50 years of brutal and illegal occupation, we would have always been on top of these rankings. So when in 1991 we regained independence, we just reclaimed our place, rightful place in Europe and on those rankings. So it has been fast. But for many, it was 50 years of pause and then coming back to where we should have been in the first place.
Walking up to the embassy today, a big sign on the side of the building, a banner, I would say it's
Yes.
a banner, 100-year anniversary. What's that all about?
In 1918, February of 1918, we first declared independence, and we're celebrating 100 years this year. Many others in Europe, of course, celebrating 100 years this year. So our president likes to say that after this, hopefully we'll stop counting. And, it's just going to be Independence Days every February, but this year is special. It is 100 years.
There's a long history to this country, yet a short history at the same time. I'm thinking of, you've been ruled by many, many people over the years, and in World War II, it was really a battleground, huh?
We were, and have been in history many times before. For us, I mean, we like to think that we've been around for at least 5,000 years in the part of the world that we inhabit today. It all started with the Northern Crusades in the 13th century when we were first Christianized. We had visitors who stayed and ended up staying in for 7 centuries. We changed hands several times. The Swedish crown, the Danish crown, the Polish, the Russian Tsar, they all had Estonia at different times. The local landlords were always German speaking, and the Estonians were peasants. We started understanding that we're a separate people, that we should have a right to rule ourselves. Somewhere in the 19th century, during the first wave of enlightenment in Estonia and the awakening of the Estonian feelings. And then we gained independence in 1918. It didn't come easy. It didn't come easy. We didn't have many friends in the world back then, so we ended up fighting a war of liberation. We fought with friends. We had Finnish volunteers. We had volunteers from all over. The American Red Cross helped us a great deal, and we ended up winning against the Soviets and against the German nobility in 1920. So we know that freedom is not free. We learned it already in our War of Independence, and we relearned it every single day of the brutal occupation.
Let's talk about some of the basics, a kind of a Estonia 101. Tell us a little bit about the country, the people, the population, the capital city. Just run with that for a bit, okay?
Well, many Americans are surprised to learn that Tallinn, our capital city, is as far north as Anchorage, Alaska is. When you look at the map, you don't necessarily realize that. So when you mention that, people realize, okay, we're a Nordic country, and we are. Not many capital cities that would be further north from us. Helsinki, the capital of Finland, is roughly 60 miles north of Estonia. So Tallinn and Helsinki, probably the closest, geographically closest two capitals in Europe. We're a country of roughly 1.3 million people. Many cities in the United States have more people than we have in our country. But territory-wise, we're bigger than Switzerland. We're bigger than the Netherlands. We're bigger than Denmark. So when you think of only 1.3 million people in a territory that's bigger than that of the Netherlands, then you can probably imagine lots of unspoiled nature, beautiful islands. We have 1,500 islands, many of them habited, many of them uninhabited, beautiful shores, and at the end of the day, a very vibrant economy and lots of vibrant people.
Talk a little bit about the neighborhood, your neighbors, and a couple of things. You've just referenced one thing that impressed me. 50% of the country is forests.
Yep.
And then water is all over the place, whether it's bays or seas or lakes or gulfs or rivers or whatever. You know, it's just an amazing. And those two things, forests and water, must have a profound effect on the psychology of the country and its people.
I think so. Estonians love the forests. We're very proud of the fact that so much of our land is still covered with forests. There are major debates taking place in Estonia as we speak as to how much we should cultivate the forests. There are those who say that we are now doing it in a sustainable manner, and there are others who are critical, would like to see less human activity in forests. But Estonians have always been fond of the forests. That has been part of our culture for centuries. And so has the Baltic Sea. We're a Baltic Sea nation, surrounded by the Baltic Sea. All of the islands obviously surrounded by the Baltic Sea. So much of our heritage is linked to the fact that we are a maritime nation, a nation that has used the sea to its benefit in a sustainable way for centuries.
Neighbors are Russia
to the north, Russia to the east, Latvia to the south.
Latvia.
And then we identify ourselves with all of the Baltic Sea nations. So Sweden, Denmark, obviously, Poland.
And right across the way, Finland, right?
Finland's very close geographically, very close culturally. The languages are related. We are not a widely spoken language in the world, or a family of languages. So it's us, the Finns, and then the Hungarians. But we and the Finns, language-wise, are the closest.
I was looking at a map. How far is it, if you can do it in miles, is it from the shores of Finland and Estonia?
60 miles, roughly.
60 miles, okay.
Almost nothing. I mean, you take a ferry over from Tallinn to Helsinki. Oh, you do. Several times a day. They purposefully go slow so that you would have time to enjoy the ferry. There are fast ones and slow ones. So you can get there. We used to have a helicopter service between the two capitals from downtown to downtown. I think it was 17 minutes.
Wow.
So when we think of Tallinn and Helsinki these days, we, as both members of the European Union, there is no actual physical border. There's freedom of movement. So we think of a Tallinn-Helsinki suburban or urban area rather than two separate cities. Many Estonians go work in Helsinki. Many Finns come and spend their weekends in Tallinn. So increasingly, I think, you will see and notice the two cities getting closer and closer together.
How exciting. Let's switch gears and go back to 1991, okay? The country is emerging from Soviet rule, domination, occupation, whatever. You're starting from scratch. You have nothing. And as you told me right before we sat down, you know, everything was at its worst. Everything was gray, the buildings, even the people, the streets, the impression must have been horrible, huh? But you start from scratch, and you just have grown so beautifully in these last few years. Talk a little bit about the beginning and the philosophy.
Well, it's almost 30 years now.
30 years, yeah.
So yes, we did start from scratch in many ways. Certain areas of government, we literally started from scratch. One of those areas is defense, for instance. There was nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there was a moment in the development or redevelopment of the Estonian Armed Forces when we really had an army of one. I mean, there was a moment when the first person joined to restart the armed forces.
Wow.
So not as a slogan, but as a fact.
Yes.
In many other areas, we had something, but that something was horrible. Soviet infrastructure, Soviet legacy that we wanted to get rid of as fast as we possibly could.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's actually what we did. We got rid of everything Soviet as fast as we possibly could.
Wow.
Now it was difficult, of course, in the early 1990s especially. The reforms that were undertaken, especially economic reforms, meant that many people were hurting, but many people were hurting anyways. Mm-hmm. But thanks to the radical reforms of the early 1990s, we managed to stabilize the economy by the mid-1990s and then started growing and growing fast. Mm. Now what we understood from day one was that if we wanted to catch up with our, for instance, close neighbors, the Finns, mm-hmm. or other Western Europeans, then doing what they had been doing all along would just simply not be enough. Mm-hmm. We needed to somehow leapfrog. So we were very open from the very beginning to everything new, new policies, new technologies. We implemented tax reforms which were not popular in the world back in the day. We adopted our own currency. Many thought it would fail soon. It didn't. Mm-hmm. The tax reform turned out to be a huge success story. And then we started using and implementing new technologies, managing to bypass many of the legacy systems that our Western friends had, mainly online banking, internet in every aspect. We use internet in every aspect of societal life, created a true cyber society, I think the first in the world.
I want to delve into this whole technology piece. But before I go there, I just want to say, I was looking at the government and the structure of the government, and I came up with 4 Ps, President, Prime Minister, Parliament, and parties, mm-hmm. which is, that says pretty much all. And the President is a woman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about technology. I have read some articles that have just totally and completely blown me away. I guess it goes back to this, everything from identification numbers mm-hmm. when you're born, to people voting on the internet, filing their income tax returns on the internet. Talk a little bit about how that all took off. I gather that Finland offered you an old phone system which you turned down and said, we're going to go jump ahead.
Well, we've tried to jump ahead in every field, but cyber has really been the major success story.
Yes.
We do 99% of bank transactions online. Now, today this is the norm elsewhere as well, but we started doing that a decade, even mm-hmm. 2 decades ago. Mm-hmm. We do our taxes online because the government is online, so we do our taxes online. It roughly takes us 5 minutes less when you are when you just work in one place. Uh-huh. The form is pre-filled, you log on, and that's it. I sold my car not long ago, before coming here, put an ad up and somebody wanted to buy it. We met at a parking lot, and he looked at the car, he test drove it, he liked it, and we finalized the transaction right then and there without going to a DMV. So he wired me the money online, and we logged on. Both of us had to log on to the basically our equivalent of the DMV, and the ownership of the car changed hands, and we did it all. I guess we had to use like 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, for the whole thing, without having to show up anywhere. What makes all of this possible is first and foremost that we can identify ourselves online. And that's where the state and the government comes in to play. The state does issue you a personal, unique identification number when you're born. You also get an ID card, and that ID card is mandatory if you're in Estonia, if you live in Estonia. You don't necessarily have to have a passport. You do, however, have to have the ID card. On the ID card is a chip. You have your own personal PIN code, much like with many bank cards, debit cards, credit cards nowadays. But you use this card to log on safely. You log on, you identify yourself in the digital world, much like we expect people to identify themselves in the physical or the analog world. If you show up at a DMV, for instance, or at a bank, you show an ID to make sure that you are who you say you are. And that's the basis in the analog world, and it is the basis for doing anything in the digital world. So we offer that to our citizens, and that makes digital society possible. Everything else comes naturally.
So when you talk about an e-government and an e-state, what are we talking about there?
So
just the ease?
Just the ease, and the fact that you can do almost everything online. I guess the only thing you cannot do online is get married. You could theoretically, technology-wise. I mean, it wouldn't be a problem. But I guess we've chosen to keep some things in the analog and physical world.
Skype, I read that. It plays a big role in this whole development, doesn't it?
Well, Skype is one of the Estonian so-called unicorns, companies that started small and then took off and became global and very successful. There are 4 unicorns in Estonia that grew out of Estonia, I should rather say. 4 now global companies that started as Estonian startups. So in addition to Skype, there is Taxify, for instance, and TransferWise. And there are more to come, I'm sure, because people in Estonia are innovative. We cannot beat anybody when it comes to numbers. I mean, there's not a huge number of us. We can't beat anybody location-wise. There are other places that are perhaps better location-wise, weather-wise, climate-wise, when it comes to, for instance, agriculture. But we certainly can beat others when it comes to innovation and the power of the individual brain. So we like to say we don't mine a lot. The only thing we like to mine is the treasures that are between our 2 ears.
I gather that entrepreneurship is huge.
Indeed.
And kids in school are learning how to write code, huh?
We are trying to make sure education is key. And the Estonian education system is very successful. And the most important thing, I mean, we're top ranked when it comes to education in Europe, in the world. But I think the most important thing is not that we have great schools. I mean, other places have great schools. It's the egalitarian nature of our education system. Anybody, anywhere in Estonia can get an outstanding education, can go on and succeed in whichever field he or she is interested in. And that's the important thing. That's what keeps the society fair, and that's what provides everybody with an opportunity to excel.
I gather free education?
Absolutely.
Universal health care?
Absolutely.
Flat tax?
Flat tax.
Low debt?
Almost no debt. Yeah,
almost
low debt.
No debt.
Yeah.
Same-sex marriage? Very liberal country as well.
Same-sex marriage is a topic for discussion. It has created discussion within the society. Most other things on your list, however, are taken for granted, absolutely taken for granted. And the tax code, I mean, what makes it special is not necessarily the rate of tax, but the simplicity of the tax system. So
and people buy in.
And people buy in. So if you're an individual interested in starting a company, now with our online services, you can do it all online.
Yeah.
You can sign all the documents online. But the important thing is that you can be absolutely certain that the Estonian government treats you as it treats a multinational global corporation or as it treats itself. The playing ground is fair, it's easy to understand, bureaucracy is almost non-existent, and that's what's made our economic success story possible.
What's at the heart of the culture of Estonia?
Language, our language is at the heart of our culture.
And what drives the economy?
Innovation.
Innovation. Just a couple of minutes left. I know your background is defense. How important is defense for your security, our security, NATO, that piece of the pie, and your relationship vis-a-vis the United States?
Well, that's a lot for a few minutes, but we take security very seriously. Our president likes to say, whenever she's asked about the security situation, she likes to compare us to the Japanese. And then she goes on explaining that we don't have earthquakes in Estonia, but the Japanese do. So when we get the question of, are you afraid because of the security situation? She likes to go back to the Japanese comparison and say, well, are the Japanese afraid because they sometimes get earthquakes? No, they're not. They prepare. They make sure their buildings are constructed in a way that so that they can survive earthquakes. This is the same way we look at security. We're not concerned, we're not afraid, but we've lived in that part of the world for quite some time to understand that, first of all, freedom is not free. You need to invest in your own security. We have been at, or rather above, 2% of GDP defense spending for quite some time now. The reason why we joined NATO is because we understand that we cannot guarantee our security alone, and neither can anybody else in this globalizing world. We all need to defend our way of life, but we need to do it together with others who share the same values and principles that we hold so dear. So the defense of Estonia does not start at Estonia's borders. The defense of the United States, I would argue, does not start at US borders either. It's much wider than that in this day and age where geography is losing importance. So working on security ourselves, but working on security together with our allies is key for us, absolutely. The relationship with the United States, outstanding, has been outstanding no matter who's been president or who's had control of the House or the Senate, and goes back to before we regained our independence. Throughout the occupation, and this is something every Estonian knows, the US had what we now know as the non-recognition policy of Soviet occupation. Throughout the 50 years, the Estonian flag was always flying at the State Department. You never took it down. We know it. Estonians, even those who are not dealing with American affairs or foreign affairs in general, know it, and we value it greatly. So we go back way beyond 1991. Our soldiers have stood shoulder to shoulder to American soldiers in Iraq and elsewhere. We are allies in NATO. And I can't think of a single area or a single issue where we would disagree. So cooperating more, coordinating our activities in different international organizations more is what we can do, but we can't really improve relations because they're already outstanding.
What do you see as your mission as ambassador here in the United States?
I think first and foremost, it's strengthening the already outstanding relations. As I said, I can't improve them because they're already at 100%, but I can certainly strengthen them. I can make sure there are more areas where we cooperate. I can make sure that more Americans come to Estonia and more Estonians come to the United States to build on people-to-people contacts. Economic cooperation can improve. We can get better at selling our goods to the United States and buying American goods. So these are, I think, the three areas where I see my role. First, obviously, is the strengthening of the already outstanding ties, first and foremost, in security.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so
pleasure.
much for the education.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. For information about This Is America and the World, and to watch all of our programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net, and look for us on Facebook and Twitter. You can listen to all of our ambassador interviews on our podcast, The Ambassador Series. It's available on our website and iTunes. This Is America and the World is brought to you by Whittle School and Studios, the U.S.-China Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation, guided by Julia Chang Block, President, the League of Arab States, the Republic of Haiti, the Rotendaro Family Trust, Japan, History, Hospitality, and Advanced Technology, Sharing Tomorrow. The Forerunner Foundation, dedicated to forward-thinking public policy. And the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings.